The top 10 scary time capsules scientists refuse to open. Number 10. Statues. Workers seem to have discovered what appears to be a 121-year-old time capsule in 2022 as they were dismantling the remnants of a pedestal that once held a statue of the Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Crews have been working to remove the pedestals of the Confederate statues for months. The apparent time capsule found is likely the third one recovered from the Confederate pith on Monument Avenue. In December, a time capsule was found inside the former base of the Robert E. Lee statue when crews dismantled it. There's also reported to be a time capsule beneath the Stonewall Jackson statue, which could be found soon too. According to newspaper records, the box is said to contain relics of the Civil War, Masonic tradition, and Richmond history, including a guide to Richmond and the battlefields by Carton McCarthy, a $100 Confederate note, the Daily Dispatch and Richmond Times newspapers, and a polished chip of marble from the front step of the Jefferson Davis Mansion, now known as the White House of the Confederacy. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this actually is pretty cool. Number 9. World War II. In 2016, a time capsule buried by the German army in 1934 was found in Poland. Archaeologists had known about the capsule's existence for a number of years, but it was buried under thick concrete. They had buried it there over 80 years before during the construction of the Oldenburg-Rossnitz building, which was used to train officers of their party. Professional miners broke through the concrete, and even then they had to wade through large amounts of groundwater that had pooled up. Now, once it was on the surface, the historians were eager to open it up. What they found was both surprising and not surprising. There were a number of photographs, including some images of their German leader. There are newspapers along with 2 copies of an autobiographical manifesto written by their leader. One of the researchers described the contents of the time capsule as perfectly preserved, as the place it was buried was an important place for those kinds of people. Number 8. Einstein's letter. In 1939, Albert Einstein contributed a letter he wrote to the World's Fair time capsule. The time capsule is intended to be opened in the year 6939, exactly 5,000 years after which it was buried. The time capsule was called Time Capsule 1, and in 1964, when the World's Fair returned to the same site in New York, a second time capsule called Time Capsule 2 was buried just 10 feet north of the first one. Now, along with Einstein's letter, the time capsule contained 35 small everyday items. In the years since then, the world has come to respect Einstein as one of the most intelligent people of all time, and someone who seemed to have a great insight into the unknown. That's why when people found his letter that described the brutality of war and its place in human nature as quite disturbing. His note read, "Our time is rich in inventive minds, the inventions of which could facilitate our lives considerably. We are crossing the seas by power and utilize power also in order to relieve humanity from towering muscular work. We have learned to fly and we are able to send messages and news without any difficulty over the entire world through electric waves. However, the production and distribution of commodities is entirely unorganized, so that everyone must live in fear of being eliminated from the economic cycle, in this way suffering for the want of everything. Furthermore, people living in different countries kill each other at an irregular time intervals, so that also for this reason, anyone who thinks about the future must live in fear and terror. This is due to the fact that intelligence and character of the masses are incomparably lower than the intelligence and characters of the few produce something valuable for the community. I trust that prosperity will read these statements with a feeling of proud and justified superiority." Now, this is a great message, and I feel like it will always be relevant, but it wasn't supposed to be opened for a long time though, so I just want to know why they opened it so soon. Number 7. The Apartment. In June 2010, a French woman named Solange Bargin died in south of France at the age of 91. When the executors of her were going through her records, they discovered that she actually owned an entire apartment in Paris that she had never mentioned before. They noticed that she'd been making regular payments for this place for decades, and when they finally opened it up, they were astonished to find the apartment had been untouched. It contained countless paintings, furniture, and common elements of the early 20th century life. The whole apartment was a time capsule frozen in time. So why did she have that mysterious apartment? Well, it turns out that Solange had inherited the apartment after her grandmother died in 1939. Now, at some point during the Second World War, Solange had left her apartment in Paris and fled to the south of France from the Germans when they arrived. Now, she never mentioned the apartment to anyone, but continued to pay for it over all those years. While some of the priceless paintings just gathered dust, one of them even sold for €3 million at an auction. Number 6. mental hospital. On July 23, 2015, a demolition crew working on the grounds of the former Central State Hospital unearthed a time capsule buried on July 23, 1958 in the cornerstone of the Barr Treatment Center building. Now you're telling me they accidentally found this exactly 57 years after it was buried? To the day? That is insane. Now personally, if I found something like that at a mental institution, I would leave it alone, but they opened it and it contained a message to the future, and it was in the form of a video with doctors who worked there. The experts were excited to hear what the message would say, but were disappointed to find that most of the audio was missing as it had degraded over the years. There was only a little bit left at the end where an unknown man said, when the psychiatrists of the future open this time capsule, only they will be able to tell how well we've solved our treatment problems. The audio cuts out, and when it returns, the men are discussing electroshock therapy. Now, the hospital eventually closed down in 1992, and historians are having a hard time figuring out who the men are in the actual video and what the missing audio parts were, especially when it comes to electroshock therapy. Number 5. J.M. Barrie. J.M. Barrie was the name written on a trunk that was discovered in 2010 by two women who were clearing out an abandoned building in Los Angeles. J.M. Barrie was a nurse from Scotland, and she had the same initials as James M. Barrie, the author of Peter Pan, who's also Scottish. When the pair opened the trunk up, they were horrified to find two dead bodies of the young. They had been in there from the 1930s. They were wrapped in sheets and hidden in doctor's bags, along with some old newspapers and other belongings. Investigators found no connection between the two individuals though, even though a copy of Peter Pan was found and also membership papers for the Peter Pan Woodland Club Resort. The coroners reported no signs of trauma on the bodies, and one of them had clearly reached full term while the smaller one may have been born prematurely. Despite there being no concrete link between Peter Pan and the bodies, some people have speculated there is one, and that has something to do with Never Neverland, where the young never grow up, if you get what I'm saying. Number 4. Schoolboy. In 2016, a demolition crew in Albuquerque, New Mexico discovered a time capsule from 1968 near a former elementary school. It appeared to have been made by a boy at the time who wanted it to be found at some point in the future. Now, the workers were prepared for a cute message, but the letter they found was actually horrifying. The note read, "I am dead. I go to Montgomery School. That is the Olden School name. I was born in 1900. Now I'm dead. My favorite subject is spooking the police. I play the guitar. In case you don't know what that is, it's a board with strings on them. I am 10 years old. See you later, savages." That was it. That was the whole letter, and it was signed by a boy called Greg Lee Youngman. Now, efforts to find Greg have been unsuccessful, and some people say that was because there was really some sort of guitar-playing ghost from a century ago living near the school who had just left a letter, and others say it was a kid who just wanted to freak people out. Either way, the letter itself is pretty creepy. Number 3. The Mother. This horrifying story from 2016 is about a woman in North Carolina who thought she had struck an absolute bargain when she bought a freezer from her neighbor for just $30. When she opened it at home though, she was horrified to find human remains in the freezer. Now, the neighbor put her own mother inside of there and simply told the buyer she had been using it as a time capsule. In an interview, the buyer said, "She sold me her frozen mother for $30. How do you do something like that?" I think an even better question would be why. The woman said she hadn't seen her neighbor's mother in months but didn't really suspect any foul play. When the police went to investigate on that day, they found the daughter had already left town, telling the buyer that she was going to West Virginia to visit her mother in a nursing home, even though she knew full well where her mother really was. Number 2. Box in the woods. A while ago, a man was using his metal detector in some woods and came across a time capsule. He excitedly opened it up but found some disturbing items inside. It was filled with a teddy bear, clothes, photos, a camera, and a girl's Pee Wee softball medal from 2003. It looked like the belongings of a young girl. Soon, people began to speculate if the time capsule actually held the trophies of someone who ended people's lives. If true, it's thought they wanted to hold on to these mementos, and they'd chosen the forest as a secluded spot where nobody could find it. I'm sure they didn't expect a man with the metal detector to find it. The police investigated but concluded that the items were probably innocent memorabilia left as a time capsule by their owner. They tested the items for DNA and began to reference it to the list of unsolved crimes, hoping to find a match that might lead to solving the disappearance grandparents from the past, but it seems like they haven't gotten an answer. And coming in at number 1 is Hiroshima. In January 1968, 2 Japanese companies agreed to create a joint time capsule project in celebration of Japan's World Exposition in 1970. It was intended to be buried for 5,000 years, but the upper capsule was opened in the year 2000 and is intended to be opened every 100 years afterward. It was intended to give the people of the future an insight into the world in 1970 and also the everyday life of Japanese people. It contained artifacts recorded through art, literature, and music, and it also contained some more unusual items like a slinky toy, some glass eyeballs, and the black fingernail of a Hiroshima atomic bomb survivor. Yeah, gross. It had only been 25 years since the US dropped that atomic bomb on Hiroshima that led to Japan's surrender, and it was still fresh in the mind of many Japanese people. Now, human fingernails do not decompose, so this one should still be intact in the year 6970. The time capsule's creators felt that this would serve as a reminder of the horrors of the war for all future generations, which I have to say is a good idea, but it sure is dark.